when it comes to a tough decision, I'm also reminded of Scott Reed, who's a political commentator, said about Doug Ford during COVID. Once people decided he was well intended, they'd forgive some of the flubs a bit. And I like to think I've earned that with my community as well. But I will take the time to actually explain and say, I'm weighing up, and maybe this is my legal training, but I'm weighing up a bunch of different equities here. Sometimes on a development application, it's the fact that I know we would lose if we decline this and they took us on appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, or this is our moment of leverage. The developer's given us a bunch of concessions and I want to actually bank these concessions now. So sometimes I actually feel like I narrate my own thinking in the council chamber or on social media to say, this is a compromise, and compromise isn't a dirty word because we found some common ground. And did I get 100% of what I wanted? No, but is it materially better if I say yes to this than say no? That's how I try and sort of bring people into my own thinking and show my work.
Welcome to the Cross Border Interviews, the online show where we dive into the insights of municipal political leaders from across Canada. Now, our mission on this show is quite simple. Shine a light on the dedicated individuals who day in and day out work around the council table to shape the communities that we call home. And joining us for today's episode is Bradford West Gwillimbury Councillor Jonathan Scott. The town of Bradford West Gwillimbury offers a return to the small town charm and a sense of community long lost in large urban centers. Bradford West Gwillimbury is a vibrant, thriving community of 42,000 plus residents who possess a sense of pride and community spirit. The town is characterized by local initiatives and a commitment to be a complete and healthy community where there are opportunities for everyone to contribute and to benefit. In the heart of every thriving community lies a well-crafted strategic plan. But crafting such a plan requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of local needs. Enter Strategic Steps, your partner in municipal strategic planning. Strategic Steps' team of experts have years of experience in municipal administration. At Strategic Steps, they just don't develop plans. They co-create homegrown strategies tailored to your unique community. They listen, they collaborate, they empower your community to thrive. Contact Strategic Steps today and take the first step towards a brighter future for your municipality. Call Strategic Steps at 780-416-9255 or visit strategicsteps.ca to get started. Councillor, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about yourself and talking about your community of Bradford West Gwillimbury, if I've pronounced that right. If I haven't, you'll correct me in about 2 seconds. But I appreciate you taking time to sit down with me and do this interview. I want to start by getting to know the man behind the persona a little bit of councillor. And I've got to ask the same question I've asked every single municipal leader who's ever come on the show. Where did your sense of duty to serve your community come from, Jonathan?
Well, thank you for having me. And you did pronounce Bradford West Gwillimbury correctly. It is a mouthful. We're often confused with Brantford or Brampton, but we're between Vaughan and Barrie in the GTA. I loved growing up in a small town, and it really was a small town when I was a kid. It's now about 50,000 people and just one of the fastest growing parts of the country. But my mom's a teacher, my father's a local minister, and they say that pastors' kids actually end up going into public service in one way or another. Everyone from Gordon Brown and Theresa May in the UK to some Canadian and US politicians have that same origin story. So to me, there's a group of people at the church who aren't biologically my aunts or uncles, but they feel like they are. And I think that brought me into community service, whether it was the food bank. I actually wrote a column for the local newspaper in high school, and I've always been fascinated in my professional life about fixing problems. And so when my predecessor passed away during COVID, both his ex-wife, the mayor, encouraged me to run. I'd worked for the provincial government. I have a background in business and law academically. So it felt like a really good opportunity to serve a growing community. And, my ward was the town when I was growing up. It's the old end of town today, but that means that my ward is the parts I remember as a kid, the parks I remember as a kid, the old arena, the riverfront, and getting an opportunity to dig my teeth into what I like to think of as renovating an old house is a really cool opportunity. And it's a huge honor to be knocking on people's doors. I was knocking on people's doors during a by-election in the pandemic when we were allowed to do so. And it was people's parents who I'd played hockey with or what have you. So it was a really nice feeling. And it's still a small town at heart, even though we've grown so much.
So there's a few things I want to digest there, and I want to start by going into, did you ever think you'd ever become a politician? Because looking at your resume, because I had started to do a little bit of a deep dive on my guests before they show up on the show, it seems you're destined for not municipal politics. You would probably fit in provincially or even federally. What was it about the municipal draw that you said, if I'm going to start somewhere, that's where it should be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, thank you. That's also flattering. I I think I did have an interest as a teenager. I thought it looked cool and glamorous to be an elected official. I saw myself coming out of undergrad working in government as a backroom strategist. I didn't think I would be the person at the front of the stage. I didn't think I had the patience for giving up your weekends to go to business openings or barbecues. But what I love about municipal politics is it's so close to the people, and those weekends spent going to farmers markets and community events. Turns out I love them. It's visiting with people. Again, as someone who grew up in a church, it's very similar to that. It's checking in with people and just being social in a what is still a small town at heart. I also love municipal politics because my colleague who sits next to me is the biggest conservative there is, and he and I don't agree necessarily ideologically on everything, but we are motivated by get stuff done and cooperating and being collaborative and joking around at the council meeting when something funny happens. And so I like that camaraderie. I like that it's a level of government that if something goes wrong, you hear about it by the end of the day. It's not through the filtration of staff. I respond to every email or every social media post that's tagged to me. It's not some legislative staffer replying. It's going to be me. So no, I love it. I certainly have an interest in politics more broadly. I've been involved even in the UK and the US a bit, but I love municipal politics because it's so real and raw, and you can directly, I got an email from someone about, it's a cliche, but about a pothole, and just before I came on, I had an email back from the director about how we're going to try and tackle it. So I love that. It's problem solving at a really granular scale.
You, I can imagine potholes is something that you talk about a lot, particularly in the time that we're recording this, being the winter time, being there's
Yeah.
a lot of scraping of snow. But I want to dive into a little bit deeper because you talk about the mayor and the former councillor's ex-wife coming to you and saying you should run. What made you decide that that was the election you were going to finally put your name on the ballot? Because you could have chosen 2018, 2026, if I'm doing my math here correctly, if that's the next municipal elections in Ontario, to run. But you chose that election. What was it about that time? Was it just your life, things going on in your life that you were able to, or was there something else?
Yeah, I think it was partly that. It was really flattering to be asked. I'd been my mayor's camp. Well, he's now my former mayor, but I'd been his campaign manager in his first race. And Carla, who was Gary Baines's ex-wife, had been involved in that campaign. And Gary, my predecessor, I don't know, he was about 6'4", a former banker, and was known as the math guy on council because he'd really roll up his sleeves every budget time and come up with creative ideas. So he left a hole in the council team, and so it was flattering to be told, well, you don't have the same set of skills, but you have some skills that could be useful. It was also circumstances. We were about 6 months into COVID, which was sort of that first time we were allowed out of COVID jail. So I suppose, to be frank about it, I was a little bored. Work from home had gotten old, this seemed like a great opportunity to give back. I'd been away from town for undergrad and law school and working at Queen's Park. I'd moved home. It felt like an interesting time. And then the issues that were in the ward were revitalizing a 20-acre park and community center. The Civic Center, which is a town hall, a performing arts theater, and a new rec center, is going into my ward. The downtown core, the old main streets in my ward, and there had been sort of stalled plans to revitalize and transform our downtown, to say nothing of the riverfront. The ward itself is the suburban streets that were built in the 70s and 80s, the old downtown core from the 1800s, and the Holland Marsh. So I'm the only ward in town that's both rural and suburban, the hybrid ward it's sometimes called. And then finally, because Ward 2 is the quote-unquote older end of town, it had seen a lot of businesses, banks, grocery stores move to the newer plazas. And there was this feeling that we were the forgotten ward and needed a strong councillor to come in and put some focus and some renewal into the ward. And that all excited me. It was an opportunity, I joked earlier, to sort of renovate a house that I spent my childhood and teenage years growing up in. And that really appealed to me. I liked the team we had on council last term. We have a relatively new council this term, and we found ways to work well with each other as well. But I don't know, it felt like an exciting opportunity, and the circumstances were such that in the middle of COVID, I kind of felt, well, you know what, I'm bored anyway, why not?
Has it been what you expected? Now, looking back almost 2 years from the time you were sworn in to now, was it what you expected the role of a counselor would be?
So it's actually over 4 years now. COVID.
Oh, sorry,
plays
4 years.
with our, yeah, COVID plays with our brains. So I've done a full term despite still feeling like we're in 2021. Yeah, it's been similar but different. I mean, I love the staff team that we have. There's a lot of staff who are local. I really like working with my colleagues on council and the residents. You know, sometimes they'll give you a hard time, but it's because they're frustrated. But for the most part, I find people are exceedingly polite. They're very direct with what they want help with, and you know that you can build a reputation pretty quickly as someone who responds, who gets things done, who is going to give you the straight goods. I'm not afraid to tell someone when I don't know the answer, but let me go find out. And I also try to never say, I'm going to solve that for you right away. I always try and start with, let me look into that first, because I don't want to overpromise. So it's been, I don't know, it's actually been better than I would have expected. I part of me was a little nervous about, I'm putting myself out there, and I can be extroverted, but I'm kind of a shy guy at heart, and I wasn't sure how I'd react to all of that. But it's been good. It's amazing how I also think people kind of respond to leadership and being someone who puts myself forward to say, I want to serve the public and try and solve problems. I think that eventually can erode people's cynicism if they realize, okay, you are trying and you are following up.
So how do you make the tough decisions at the end of the day? Because after your tenure on council so far, I could imagine you've come to the realization, like every other politician has in their life, that you are not going to please 100% of the people in your community. And that means every decision you make, every vote you take is going to be criticized or put under a microscope by someone in your community or put on social media to lambaste you. How do you make the best decision for your community, knowing that you're not going to please everyone?
So I have three thoughts in my head from three different sources to answer that question. The first is, there's that old maxim, if you're explaining in politics, you're losing. I don't think that's always true. I actually think that, to quote Naheed Nenshi, politics in full sentences works. People will take the time, especially I think at the local level where you don't have the party or the leader brand, to read a Facebook post that goes into some detail or watch a video that explains and presents and advocates for a policy. And so when it comes to a tough decision, I'm also reminded of Scott Reed, who's a political commentator, said about Doug Ford during COVID. Once people decided he was well-intended, they'd forgive some of the flubs a bit. And I like to think I've earned that with my community as well. But I will take the time to actually explain and say, I'm weighing up, and maybe this is my legal training, but I'm weighing up a bunch of different equities here. Sometimes on a development application, it's the fact that I know we would lose if we decline this and they took us on appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Or this is our moment of leverage. The developer's given us a bunch of concessions and I want to actually bank these concessions now. So sometimes I actually feel like I narrate my own thinking in the council chamber or on social media to say, this is a compromise, and compromise isn't a dirty word because we found some common ground. And did I get 100% of what I wanted? No, but is it materially better if I say yes to this than say no? That's how I try and sort of bring people into my own thinking and show my work.
Can I follow up on that before you go to point 2 and 3? Because how do you
Sure.
compromise with yourself? Because as an elected official, you have your own morals and values that you stand to, that you believe in, that you hold self true to yourself of who you are. But sometimes they may fly in the face of what your residents might want or believe in. How do you balance those two opposing forces, and who wins ultimately at the end of the day for yourself? If you go out to the general public of Ward 2 and say, I have an issue, what's your thoughts on it? If they all say you should vote against it, but you really believe you should vote for it, who wins at that day for that compromise?
Yeah, I haven't had something quite like that. I mean, I've had more issues of that's not enough, you didn't go far enough. And I had to explain, well, I hear you, but they're not going to let me put a speed bump on this street. But if we did the speed bollards and the digital radar sign, that's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't compromise on values when it came to human rights or fiscal discipline. I mean, we've paid off $60 million in town debt and kept our tax rate over the 5 budgets I've been involved in to 2.7 or 2.67%, which is amongst the lowest in the province during a time of high inflation. But one of the things at budget time, I wanted a few years ago, I think $100,000 put in the budget for tree maintenance. And for some reason, the mayor was against it. That was where he was drawing the line on spending. And so I lost the vote on the 100,000. My colleague next to me puts up his hand and goes, "Would anyone go for 50,000?" Well, that failed too. But he tried again. He goes, "Okay, 30,000," and we all voted in favor and it got into the budget. Well, that was $30,000 more at a very small granular level than we would have had otherwise. And so that's where I'm happy to say, well, I'm not going to say no to half a loaf if it's materially better than I had before we started the meeting.
So going back to the original question of how do you make decisions based on the good of the community, knowing that 100% of the people are never going to be in favor of it? You were talking about how your values come into it. What metrics do you specifically put in place for yourself to say, this is the best way forward? Is it going out to the general public to talk to them? Is it just taking the recommendations from council in that council package that you get every meeting? Or is there something you do internally to make sure you're doing the best for the community?
Yeah, I mean, I have a survey on right now. I did one in the summer, just out on social media, and 150, 200 people will reply, and that gives me something of a gut check. But
is that a lot?
It feels it's a lot compared to what town surveys would typically get. So, we're happy on a town survey if we get 30 or 40 sometimes. But I don't know. I built up a good network on social media, my email list, what have you. And people I've found, I'll host a town hall and 50 people will come out because it's a way to be engaged and a way to be in the know. And I'm not afraid to kind of market it that way. This is your chance to be in the know and kick the tires on ideas you might have heard about in the coffee shop or in the Facebook groups. So, I mean, I will do and typically those are on bigger capital projects. What do you think of? And more often than not, they're polling at 60, 70% in favor, 10% neutral, 10% opposed. And, like I said earlier, oftentimes I'm more disappointing someone because it's not 100% of what they wanted or it's not their preferred solution. But that's where I'm happy to say, well, I couldn't do it the way you wanted, but we found another way to make a material difference. And so, yes, I read My undergrad was in English, then I have my law degree, so I have a background in speed reading, and so oftentimes I'll read the introduction, read the conclusion, and go through as a second read for the middle of the staff report. But more often than not, I then just call the director up and say, "What do you want to tell me that's in this?" Or "I'm not sure about X. Convince me." And sometimes I think this term of council, we've gotten really good at sometimes having a few one-on-one conversations before the meeting just to say, "Well, what are you thinking about this?" Because it's very rare that you're going to change someone's mind when we're all on our soapbox speaking around the horseshoe. But every now and then, a few of us will just have a phone call the afternoon of saying, "What did you make of this report?" And we'll then go in having a little bit more of a sense of, okay, well, that's good. That's reassuring. I felt the same way. Or I felt completely different. All right, I guess we're going to have a bit of a debate on this one.
I want to talk about one last thing before we turn
Sure.
to the town as a whole. In my conversations of doing now 308 of these
Wow.
municipal interviews from across Canada, I am starting to notice a scary trend that municipal politics is not the quote unquote sexy politics. It's not the politics that people are engaged with on a day-to-day basis, even though municipal governments impact people the most every day. In Bradford West Gwillimbury, do you get a sense that there is an apathy around what is going on at City Hall? Like if I went to your community and asked 100 people if they knew what was being debated in front of council, would they be able to tell me what was being discussed?
No, probably not specifically. They know something in general about, oh, they're trying to revitalize the downtown, or there's all this growth they're trying to manage, or maybe they've heard something if they care about the environment, about our environmental issues to try and protect the watershed. But I think it's a little choose your own adventure at the municipal level what people choose to pay attention to, and sometimes it's only when you get a letter about a development application in your backyard that you choose to engage or show up. But we have a pretty healthy group of people, retirees, who meet at the coffee shop and chew the fat about what happened at council. We have we always had a great local paper, and we're now one of those municipalities with a village media online outlet that people, I do think, read pretty religiously. So like I said, it's a bit of a commuter town in the newer part of town, but it's still a small town at heart, and I think there is a desire to in part because it is a commuter town, and COVID had a lot of people trapped in their houses. People were looking at the state of a park or the state of their roads for those 2 years when it was all work from home all the time. So I do think we have a surprisingly high engagement rate. And it's also, I think, helpful that it isn't just, we're a pretty conservative riding federally and provincially. Those elections are a bit of a fait accompli most of the time. There's been a few close races, but at the municipal level, you don't have those proxies for party or leader brands in the same way. And so I do think people kind of want to understand what's happening if they choose to engage. But no, you're right. Like if you asked 100 people, people would have some idea. They might
Would they
tell
know
you, oh,
what
my
the
taxes.
responsibility of the municipality is? Is the jurisdictional role, you know it, I know it, the people who are listening to this who are municipally inclined probably know it a little bit more than I would say and I don't want to say average person, but the person on the street. Do you get a sense that people are going to go to their MPP for healthcare issues, education issues? They're going to come to you for property tax issues, garbage park issues. They're going to go to their
Yeah.
federal government about passport issues, or because you, and I'm quoting Scott Pierce, the former president of FCM here, the government of proximity, they know who you are. They see you in the grocery store. They're probably more likely to see you than their MPP or their MP every day. So they'll come to talk to you about healthcare issues and say, you deal with it. We've elected you to be the proxy to go talk to the MPP for us.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. There's even confusion what's a county responsibility and what's a local municipality responsibility. And I could do a whole thing about how we're trying to reform the governance of Simcoe County to be more fair and representation by population for a growing town like ours. But Yeah, there's a bit of that. Every now and then I'll get an email saying I'm waiting on a response from the MP on an immigration matter, and I'll respond, well, call Mike or Carol, but they're on top of it. They're just on top of a lot of immigration files, and nothing I can say is going to speed them up one way or another, because they're doing their best, and they're qualified staffers. So there's a bit of that, but I also think, to your point, sometimes they want a bit of a Sherpa to say, I'm having an issue with healthcare. I know the municipality owns and runs two healthcare clinics in town in collaboration with the hospital in the province. So what about that? Or some of the environmental issues definitely butt up against federal or provincial policies or grant funding, what have you. So there's a bit of help me navigate this. And then even just, I've seen countless times on local Facebook groups, my recycling wasn't picked up, and someone will reply, well, call the county, dum dum. That's who's in charge. And other than the word dum dum, I think that's a healthy thing.
I want to turn to the town of Bradford West Gwillimbury as a whole now. And before I do this, if you've listened to this show, you can skip this for about 15 seconds. If not, please stay with us as I go through this rant. This is a conversation between the councillor and myself. This is not a motion of council. This is not a direction of council. This is not a policy of council. This is the councillor's opinion and his opinion alone. Now, it may line up, but he does not speak for council. He has one vote on that council, and he gets one vote, and he needs a majority of votes to get anything passed. So that being said, it is his opinion. So, councillor, with that finally being said, in your opinion, what do you believe are the biggest challenges facing Bradford West Gwillimbury today as of recording in January 2025?
So I think the single biggest issue is managing growth. And then there's a couple of issues that flow out of that. We're mandated by the province of Ontario to grow to about 80,000 plus over the next planning cycle. And we've already doubled 3 times in my lifetime. So this is substantial. We're about 50,000 now. They want us to go above 80,000. Now that opens up a whole host of issues. Infrastructure. We don't have enough schools. We desperately need a new public high school. We just got an addition to the Catholic high school. We need 3 or 4 more elementary schools because kids shouldn't be in portables, quite frankly. So we've been advocating on that. Healthcare. We don't have a hospital in the community. Maybe we will. Our regional health center, South Lake Health, is looking at building a second major regional hospital, and we're going to pitch ourselves. Then there's family docs. We have about 18,000 people without a family doctor, and that's a real limitation on anyone's ability to navigate the system and get good care. So those infrastructure issues or those social care issues are huge, to say nothing of roads and transit. We're on Highway 400. The province is building a highway to connect the 400 and the 404. People are broadly in favor of anything that will make commuting easier. We have a GO train station right in my ward. We'd love regional express rail. I should also say that growth and even some of the infrastructure projects I just mentioned lead to huge environmental challenges. We don't want more sprawl. We want to have smart growth and grow up, not out. So more condos or gentle density in our downtown core, particularly near the GO train station. That's part of our downtown revitalization. That's part of how we can try to be more environmentally friendly and not have suburban sprawl continue. But then the growth that's already happened puts huge pressure on the Lake Simcoe watershed and the Holland River. So we're pursuing everything from a $40 million phosphorus filtration system to I think a $2 to $3 million snow filtration system to filter the ice and the runoff that over fertilizes the river and the lake, so that we can have clean water, and the recreation and the economic benefits that come from being in an agricultural and semi-rural part of, we're sort of the last part of the GTA and the first part of cottage country, depending on how you look at it. So that's all to say there's the growth challenges, and that leads to the infrastructure, the social care, the environmental, and then the cost. Growth doesn't pay for growth. I mean, development charges currently help. Maybe the province should be funding development more directly like they used to before Harris. But when you add a new subdivision, somebody has to pay for the snow removal, the waste collection, the asset management. And we're trying to be better at making sure that the property taxes from a new development actually pay to handle the cost of the new development, but it isn't always the case. And then finally, I think on the cost side, we have so many new people, quote unquote, in town who are coming up from Toronto, North York, Vaughan, and they expect a different level of service, more library programs, more leisure services programs. So we've opened a youth center. We need to look at rebuilding and expanding our senior center. There's a lot of, I guess, like a higher caliber of give me these public services I'm used to in Vaughan. Well, we're not there yet. We're constantly playing catch up, and that puts huge strain on the operating budget. So the fact that we've kept taxes as low as we have at 2.67% over 5 years has been really challenging. We've had to be creative about how to do it, but we don't want that tension between the existing residents saying, well, hang on, why am I paying for? I thought growth was meant to pay for growth. And I think you and I both know that that's a dream, not a reality. But anyway, the one issue then is growth, and there's 4 or 5 other issues that come out from under that.
Okay, so on the Bradford West Gwillimbury's website, and I'm gonna just pull it up here for a second, just the line that they use, because I want to make sure I'm quoting it correctly. So I'm going to continue talking because that's what I need to do. So on the town of Bradford West Gwillimbury's website, it states, and I'm quoting here, the town of Bradford West Gwillimbury offers a return to the small town charm and a sense of community long lost in the larger urban centers. Now, growth comes with people, growth comes with its challenges, like you said. So, how do you sustainably grow? And do you think that the community is doing it correctly to ensure you don't lose that small town charm that people have come to Bradford West Gwillimbury to get with the growth that the province is asking you to achieve by a certain date?
Yeah, I mean that is exactly the challenge we have, and I think we've done some parts better than others. We're getting caught up on the transportation infrastructure. We had some major road projects the last couple of summers. We'll have another busy construction season this summer. We're trying to balance things. We have a really good start to an industrial park out at Highway 400 that's bringing about 4,000 jobs into the community. That's going to be huge, diversify the tax base. People can work closer to home, maybe not have to commute into the city the same way. And there's areas where we're struggling. We've attracted retirement homes to town. In fact, one was actually a client of mine before I was on council, but we're struggling with how can seniors affordably downsize? We don't have enough condos or apartments today. We have 2 under construction right now, probably another 9 in the development pipeline, but we need that mix of housing options, particularly for seniors, but also for young people who are just struggling to get into the market, the same as anywhere else in the country. But in Bradford, our average house is about 1.1 million now, which is not that different from what you get in the city of Toronto. So the drive until you can afford a house principle that Mike Moffat talks about, there's people now driving north of Bradford. I was at a swearing in ceremony for 5 new police officers, another area actually where growth has been a challenge. We have a low cop to pop ratio, but these 5 young men being sworn in, only one of them lived in Bradford. They're commuting into the community they have to police, and we see that with our teachers and our nurses, and that's not the way it used to be, where you would live in the community where you were a public servant. So I think there's things that we're doing well. We have beautiful parks and trails in all our new subdivisions. We're then spending some of our cash in lieu and parkland money to upgrade older parks, such as in my ward or my neighboring wards. But it's that balance between how much growth is happening and how much it puts stress on all the infrastructure, and then how to reasonably afford to do the upgrades you need. But as you said in the question, it's forced on us. The province has mandated what we grow by. Yes, the federal government has pulled back on immigration rates a bit, but people in this country still need a place to live, and a lot of them want to live in the suburbs where you can still get it used to be a 50-foot lot. It's now more like a 30-foot lot, but that's the stresses we're facing.
With those challenges of growth, because Ward 2 is that urban rural divide and one of the urban rural divides in your community, how do you balance the needs of the urban parts of the community with the rural parts of the community? Because I can imagine, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say I could imagine, but I know that other municipalities are faced with that dilemma a lot in Ontario, in Alberta, here in Saskatchewan, and they always have to try to balance the both. And it seems to be two opposing factors because you want to grow, but you can't forget about the rural communities as well. And that's where people are dispersed and they don't live close together. So road infrastructure is going to be a lot more expensive out there compared to in town. So, how do you see yourself as council and as councillor in balancing those two uh, portions of the community?
Yeah, and I mean, because I'm a hybrid ward, I have speeding issues in my older subdivisions and on Canal Road in the Holland Marsh because it's a bypass around town, and farmers hate that. We've tried to improve intersections, but I think we need to look at things like service roads to have that balance between. Well, this is a farming area, but it's now on the edge of a major suburb, so that's tricky. Just before I came on your show, one of my colleagues from the two rural wards sent in a long email about conversion of gravel roads to asphalt. It costs the same in the long run, but it's better for the people on those lines from respiratory issues to just wear and tear on their vehicles. So I relate to that a lot because I think I have three gravel wards, maybe four in my ward in the marsh. For those who don't know, the Holland Marsh is the soup and salad bowl of Canada. So you'll see carrots, onions, lettuce, beautiful, fertile black soil. But I also have older roads, and some of them are crescents and cul-de-sacs, and they might be the oldest unrepaved road on the asset management plan and the worst condition and the lowest volume. So they don't make the cut every year. And, to the residents of Wood Crescent, I'm trying, but so it's a real balance, and what Bradford has is the rural parts, the older suburban downtown part, which I largely represent, and then the new part of town, and so we're sort of three areas in one community.
We all have our challenges. Every municipality I speak to has their challenges. What's the thing that you are proud of when it comes to what is going on in your community? What's the accomplishment that when you go to Roma, when you go to AMO, when you go to FCM, you chat to other municipal leaders, you say, we've got our challenges, but we've got this going right for us. What's that one thing for you?
I think it's the overall revitalization efforts. So when we break ground, hopefully this spring, on transforming Holland Street, our main street, like other communities have done to make it not a highway, but back into what it used to be as a main street, or upgrading what I like to call the Central Park in my ward, building a civic center, and then hopefully I have a call about this later today. But we have a riverfront and we have canals, and we'd love trails on them to be a recreation and even tourist amenity. So to me, what got me interested in the job was the chance to revitalize the older end of town. And we've tackled, I'd say, over the past 4 years, the low hanging fruit. It's those big projects that are really going to be transformative that I'm excited about. I mean, I also, when I go to those conferences from time to time, I think I'm closely associated being on the Conservation Authority, on Conservations Ontario, and just an environmental advocate in general. I get asked a lot about the environmental initiatives we have underway to protect the watershed or be more energy efficient. And I'm quite passionate about that as well. But I think the main thing is the revitalization efforts, because that urban renewal is what got me excited about the job in the first place.
Can I broach a subject that's probably going to take us an extra 5 minutes to talk about, if you don't mind, because it's a
Sure.
subject that you just said. I want to talk about conservation because it is a passion
Yeah.
of yours, and I see it on your social media feed all the time. What do municipalities need to do to conserve their natural beauty more in 2025? Because we are in a crossroads right now where we are on the cusp of the province dictating one thing, grow, 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 and that means that's going to come at the expense of some nature areas. So, what do municipalities need to do to balance those two, but also conserve the beauty that is, and I hate to say rural Ontario, but I lived in rural Ontario, so I know rural Ontario.
Yeah. Well, so I actually think the answer is sort of in the question, and it's being placed in the values of a small town. We've had climate action in this country, I think, unfortunately reduced to what's it going to cost me. And yes, I'm talking about the carbon tax, but that's one tool in the toolkit, love it or hate it. I think the overarching ethos or framework we should have as small town values of conservation, efficiency, dare I say, darn your socks rather than buy a new pair of socks, that kind of old school mentality. So it's about conserving farmland and protecting nature. It's about filtering our water. You know, we installed these litter traps on older stormwater basins because back in the day they weren't fit to filter out litter and sediments. And after a year, it's just astounding the level that they've cleaned up what otherwise would have flowed into the river. Dredging stormwater ponds from time to time in the newer subdivisions, but also energy efficiency. I think yes, that could mean things like solar panels or heat pumps, but it also means when we, for instance, renovated an old public school that I actually went to as a student into a community center, we cut in half the building's emissions and its utility costs with new windows and insulation and the whole 9 yards. And so we have a climate change mitigation and adaptation plan that our Green Initiatives Advisory Committee that I chair coming forward at the end of this month, beginning of next month. So much of that plan is preserve your forest, preserve your farmland because they're carbon sinks. But as you're renovating your older buildings or building new ones to higher energy efficiency standards, take the operating savings and create a reserve fund to then fund the capital improvements for the next building, because then you get into a virtuous cycle. And finally, I think we've embedded a lot of environmental measures. We use more of a gravel salt mix now so that we're not salinating our river and our lake to the extent that we were 30 years ago. There's pieces like that. Our head of Parks and Rec, he often says, well, you know, we do that already. We just don't call it what they want us to call it, or we do it to the standard of LEEDs, but would we think to apply for the certification? So a lot of these things are, you know, old-fashioned small town values. They're also good housekeeping practices. And I like to think that the what I'm trying to do with climate action, environmental protection, conservation is get back to this is actually going to save you money in the long run on your taxes, because it'll reduce our insurance costs to even just have a climate change adaptation plan. It will reduce our utility costs. We are more energy efficient. And there's even some cool backdoor policies around if we create an audit of every bid on their GHG emissions, it's a backdoor way to prioritize buy local, because the local cement company or the local paving company isn't going to have the same mileage to drive up here in the morning for the job. So I kind of think we need to get back as a country, and maybe I'd even say as a progressive movement, to climate action isn't about what it's going to cost you. It's actually about what it's going to save you, both environmentally and financially.
Are you concerned, and I'm going into the political weeds here now, but are you concerned that the climate, and I hate to say movement, but the climate issue is no longer the hot button issue that it was in 2015 or even 2010? It seems like more and more people are not worrying about the climate, and more municipalities aren't moving towards those climate strategies. Do you think municipalities need to hold fast and steady to ensuring that they do have a climate strategy to protect the areas that they already have and don't lose any more?
Yeah, I do. But I also think the solution sort of in the question. Your climate strategy should be part of your approach of how to keep taxes low. It should be part of how you reduce insurance costs or utility costs, or even how you attract local jobs. Modular housing is an interesting emerging industry that we're pursuing, but that's also a climate action approach, because better insulated, smaller homes might be the way to go for some people. So, yeah, I think it's a fair point, but I would just say that's also a flip side opportunity to go back to this is about protecting nature and the future of the planet and our kids, but it's also about if done properly, how to save you money today. Stephen Lecce and Sam Oosterhoff, both friends of mine, both cabinet ministers for a conservative government, and I worked for the previous government at Queen's Park. They announced this new, I think, $12 billion energy efficiency grant program. And I was quickly on the blower to my head of ECDEV saying, see, this is what we need to embed into our local industrial and small business storefront and factory renovation grant. Because if we can piggyback on their grant, that's fantastic. So it's about, I think, bringing it home to people that cost of living is a huge concern right now, but so is quality of life. And they're not separate issues. You actually have to tie them together if you want to do it effectively.
So you worked for the Wynne government?
I sure did.
Worked for the McGuinty government. Look at that.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. Well,
Queen's Park.
Dalton had a an operating slogan. I don't if can I remember it. Be well-intended, hardworking people who care about making a difference for Ontario families. And that is a great kind of slogan to describe what government ought to be.
He was ahead of his days, and that's my opinion on that man. And I think he was what we needed at the time after the Ernie Eves, Mike Harris days. So that's my one political statement that I'll make this year on the show. That being said, I want to turn to my last subject because I'm cautious of time here. And I want to talk about one subject that's near and dear to my heart, and that is tourism.
Oh,
What are some of the hidden gems in Bradford West Gwillimbury that people need to come see? And I want to start locally first at Ward 2 and then the community as a whole. But I don't want the things that people know about. I want the things that you say, this is the hidden gem. This is the thing
wow.
you need to see. And yes, it's a Sophie's Choice question. So if there's a restaurant out there that you're going to promote, just know there's going to be backlash from the other businesses.
Well, I mean, Perfect Seasons is the local bar, and it's got a real Cheers vibe to it. We are famous for our Mexican restaurants. Believe it or not, best Mexican restaurants. There's more than one. Mexicanada, I Caramba in particular. Migrant workers come up to work in the Holland Marsh and they stay and open small businesses. How's that for the Canadian dream? Scanlon Creek Conservation Area is gorgeous all seasons. Simcoe County Forests are beautiful hiking places. We're pursuing some tourism improvements. We've looked at on-farm diversification for weddings or farmers markets on the farm. Fermanga Farm, I believe, is the name of the one that's up and running. There's another one, Chestnut Creek, I want to say. But even then, how do we bring more tourism to the Holland Marsh so you can see where your food comes from? It doesn't come from the grocery store. And then the riverfront and canal trail system. If we can get that, we'll rival the Rideau Canal. Or, when I lived in Britain, every river had a trail down the side of it and back the other side. And we don't have that to the same extent in Canada, but we need to. We have a lot of people who love to walk, run, and cycle in town, and outside of the neighborhoods, we don't have too many options right now. So that's a few things right there. But we're about 40 minutes, depending on traffic, north of Toronto. We're about 25 minutes south of Barrie. We're right in the middle of central Ontario in that respect. We have great access on highways, GO train service, and just a beautiful small town meets suburb vibe to the community. So there's my sales pitch.
Where's the spot that you go? Where's the spot in the community that you can decompress at?
I mean, I will go into Perfect Seasons, that pub, from time to time, whether it's to meet some friends or have a business meeting. Sometimes I'll even just bring my iPad and say, I can't cook dinner tonight. I have a council meeting at 7. I love Scanlon Creek. I was there this past weekend for a hike, just put a podcast on and disappeared into the forest. I love doing that. And dare I say my backyard as well, because it's a pretty quiet, tranquil spot. But Scanlon Creek's probably the one that most comes to mind. And I typically walk around my neighborhood either most mornings or most afternoons when I've just got to clear my head. Yesterday was in the afternoon because it was so bloody cold in the morning, but most days it's the morning.
My last question for you before I let you go, and it's the $1 million to wrap up the entire interview. What makes Bradford West Gwillimbury such a unique place to live, to work, and to raise a family?
I've touched on it a few times, but it's a suburb and a rural community that's still a small town at heart. A couple thousand people donate or volunteer to the local food bank a year. Lots of faith groups. There's 2 or 3 mosques, a Sikh Gurdwara, and 2 dozen churches, including my own, and people show up whether it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and are part of those communities. The schools are really good at getting kids involved in eco schools or parks and rec. It's a community where I think a lot of people are engaged because perhaps they commute 9 to 5 during the week, pick up the kids, but then on the weekend the hockey rinks are full, or the library's full, or volunteering opportunities are well subscribed. So I think it's that community spirit that still exists. We've had a couple of fires over the past few years, and the outpouring of support from not just charities or faith groups, but ordinary citizens has been huge. You know, if you have a problem in town and you share it, someone's going to try and solve it for you, because it still is that kind of not to be too cliche, but it's the place where people will dig you out of the snow, or they'll shovel their driveway and then come shovel their neighbors.
Jonathan, counselor, I want to thank you so much for doing this. As I started 2025, I was wondering what type of caliber of guests I was going to get. And after today's conversation, I know last year was great, but this year's going to be even greater. And thank you so much for sitting down with me. Thank you so much for serving your community. And thank you just for reaching out. It's always great to hear from municipal leaders and who want to talk and have an honest to goodness conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you for doing this. This is a great resource for municipal politicians and the public to learn more about the level of government that's closest to the people but sometimes forgotten.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Cross Border Interviews. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights from one of our great municipal leaders from across Canada. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite platforms and follow us on social media. For even more content and learn more about today's community and guest, visit our website at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, even your community, and let's keep the conversation going. So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time here on Cross Border Interviews. Till then.